but will some computers shut down?
Many here are criticizing the way the refugees were treated, saying Macedonia made an already bad situation even worse.
In the Cold War, it became trite to say that NATO was an alliance looking for a role.
What is it about Hamilton that seems to make it such an employment success? Statisticians have...
This was more than just a remarkable personal triumph, it was redemption for the whole Tour de France. Last year's doping scandal was...
The nurses say they won't go back to work until a deal is signed. Which side will blink first?
May be left to the Prime Minister to determine Canada's position and decide whether or not there will be a magazine.
Hello again, I'm Knowlton Nash, and this is News in Review. On this edition, the murder of Reena Virk.
All the individuals involved in Reena's assault and murder have all been brought to justice. It's very satisfying.
2 teenagers get life for killing their Victoria schoolmate. Conditional sentencing.
He inflicted pain on me. He inflicted humiliation on me. And he should be punished for that. It should hurt, like I've been hurt.
Serving time in the community instead of in prison. Iran. 20 years after the Ayatollah overthrew the Shah, the winds of change are once again blowing through Tehran.
If they do not listen to us, maybe it's going to happen a new revolution.
And hockey injuries. A brand of play that threatens the lives and careers of players. We begin with a story that horrified Canadians from coast to coast. It was the brutal beating and killing of a teenage girl in a suburb of idyllic Victoria on Vancouver Island more than 2 years ago. The incident was all the more shocking for the racial implications of the attack and the fact that most of the assailants were teenage girls.
It's not very easy to lose a child or any member of your family, and especially when she's murdered.
Time has not erased this grandfather's grief. His grandchild was just 14 years old when she was killed. That was nearly 2.5 years ago. It happened here in Victoria, the picturesque capital of British Columbia. A pretty city for an ugly crime, the murder of Reena Virk. Her killers were teenagers, schoolmates. They swarmed her by the Craigflower Bridge, teased and tortured her, beat her senseless. After that, most of them left, went to a nearby convenience store and took buses home. But 2 stayed behind. They beat her again and drowned her. Why? How does this act of vicious brutality fit into our world? Let's start our examination with a picture of Reena Virk's life. Here's the CBC's Leslie McKinnon.
This is the incongruously beautiful setting where Reena Virk spent the last tortured period of her life. It's not certain why her tormentors chose that night of November the 14th to assault her, but enough is known about Reena Virk's short, unhappy life to speculate that it's quite possible she was literally bullied to death. And her attackers must have talked about it, even bragged about it, because for days before her body was found, teenagers, some parents, even the police heard rumors about a particularly savage beating. It's said other teens might have witnessed the assault. If they did, they didn't report it immediately to police. Like many teenagers, Krista Watt and Molly Pullman heard some of the gossip.
We did hear that there was, this big fight out in Esquimalt or the Gorge or something like that. But people knew. It was going around schools.
People knew, at least at the school she went to, there was at least, I forget the number, but there was some amount of people who knew that she was going to get beat up.
If a small group treated her murder casually, the larger community, when it found out, responded viscerally to her death and to the sadness of her life. A contradictory picture of her emerged as information about how very troubled Reena Virk was became public. At the time she was killed, she was living in a foster home, away from a seemingly tight-knit and very religious family. 8 months earlier, she'd accused her father of sexually abusing her when she was around 7. Months later, she withdrew all her allegations, saying she wanted to come home. At the public memorial service in a local high school, a minister from the Jehovah's Witnesses, her parents' church, characterized the dead girl as a liar.
She was not a malicious liar. Yes, she told some lies. And the lies she told on her father caused great damage, even suspicion.
The object lesson of her life, an untimely death, he implied, is that Reena's peers, especially the teenagers she met in foster homes, were not to be trusted.
So we have to say, as their friends and their family, the difficulty was not due to bad parenting.
Whatever problems she had at home, especially with her parents' restrictive rules, at school, she was a target for cruelty. Overweight and dark-complected, she was mercilessly teased.
And does it make you happy to see them happy?
Yes, it does.
They made fun about how she looked, basically.
The bearded lady was one of the names she used to get.
Bearded lady?
Yeah, she used to get called the bearded lady.
Why?
Facial hair.
Facial hair.
Like, it was just so ridiculous. Like
Yeah, and she used to get called other things.
They picked on her about her shoes, what she wore,
everything,
her makeup,
from head to toe.
You know, it's not perfect.
They call her like Beast or something like that because she was different.
But she did have friends. 13-year-old Tiana Pai met Reena in a foster home.
She always tried to fit in. She always wanted to fit in with everyone, and she did. She did have problems, though. I know she told me something about she didn't like her life, so she wanted to end it. She even had scars on her arms from trying to like slash herself or something. So she couldn't wear, she was afraid to wear t-shirts or something, so she always wore long sleeves. And when she did wear t-shirts, she always had her arms like close to her, so nobody could see them.
Bina Kashyap is Reena's mother's cousin, but Reena called her auntie. She remembers Reena not as a liar, but as a caring, loving person.
She loved children, she loved people. And she would just say to you, you know, I love you, Bina Masi, or I love your kids, she'd say to me, or I love what you're wearing. She always had a compliment, always a compliment. And I never, ever saw attitude coming out of her, ever. And that's what Reena was like. And we'd call her Reen, because we loved her.
My favorite part of her was her hair. She always had like nice curly hair. And I always told her that, yeah, I love your hair, it shapes your face, it makes you really, really pretty. She goes, no, I'm not. And then I go, yeah, you are. And I'd give her a hug and she goes, thanks, always.
You were really nice to her.
I think she needed support, so I helped her out.
As we've heard, others picked on Reena Virk. There were 8 on that night, 7 girls and a boy. The youngest 14, the oldest 16. Others may have watched. For 8 days, no one said anything to police, even as rumors swirled around school, even as police searched for the missing girl. 6 who were involved in the initial swarming were convicted in youth court as young offenders, found guilty of assault. That means they cannot be identified. The other 2 attackers were tried in adult court on more serious charges. Second-degree murder. That's murder without premeditation, not planned in advance. Their trials took place in open court without the protection given to young offenders. The CBC's Terry Molesky has that part of the story.
Warren Glowatsky's mother, Gwen Giragat, came to the trial for the first time and wept as her son was found guilty of second-degree murder. But Glowatsky himself, now 18 years old, showed no emotion as he heard the verdict. Mr. Justice Malcolm Macaulay threw out Glowatsky's claims that he merely kicked Reena Virk in the head but didn't kill her. He said Glowatsky's testimony was stunningly casual and completely unbelievable. He said it was conveniently incomplete and improbable. I do not believe him. He concluded, I am satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that he was a co-principal in the murder of Reena Virk. He actively participated. He intended to cause her bodily harm that he knew was likely to result in her death.
Yeah, we are relieved.
Do you believe justice was served today? Can you comment on that?
I think so. Yeah, justice is served, yeah.
This was more than a verdict. It was a tongue-lashing, and not just for Glowatsky, but for the friends who the judge said tried to cover up for him. Mr. Justice Macaulay said that Glowatsky's girlfriend, Sarita Hartley, was a bold liar, but not a sophisticated or a clever one. He said she lied to protect Glowatsky whenever she felt she could get away with it. And he said another friend, Chris Fox, perjured himself to protect Glowatsky. Glowatsky said nothing, although he testified last month that he didn't know why he did what he did. He couldn't explain why he kicked Reena Virk in the head or why he dragged her into this ocean inlet called the Gorge, where she drowned. Her murder means Glowatsky faces life in prison, but he'll be eligible for parole after 7 years. It took 3 days for the jury to make its decision. Kelly Marie Ellard, still only 17 years old, is guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Reena Virk. Glowatsky refused to testify at Ellard's trial, meaning that the jury never heard from the only witness able to place her at the scene of the crime. But there was a parade of witnesses who said Ellard bragged to them about attacking Virk and standing on her head to drown her while smoking a cigarette.
And very happy and satisfied that all the individuals involved in Reena's assault and murder have all been brought to justice. It's very satisfying.
Among the many things that the jury did not hear in this trial were details of the psychological analysis that was done on Kelly Ellard at the time the decision was made to raise her to adult court. In that analysis, she was variously described as, quote, a very angry girl, a wacko, and one of her schoolmates said her nickname was, quote, Killer Kelly. However, Kelly Ellard was just 15 years and 2 months old at the time of the murder of Reena Virk. For that reason, although a life sentence is mandatory, it is likely that, depending on what the judge decides, she will be eligible for parole at between 5 and 7 years into her sentence.
This story doesn't end with the verdicts. The families involved have been devastated, their lives changed forever. But it has also left a lasting mark on the country as a whole. It was truly a shocking incident. The participants in this crime were just teenagers, and all but one of them girls, and they're not supposed to be violent. But as the CBC's Adrian Arsenault reports, that is a myth.
Their look is certainly tough, so's their talk.
Stop!
And their stories? Those are tales of the battle-weary.
She said I was giving her looks. I told her I wasn't giving her no looks. And I swing it off her. And then we start fighting, and I had her good.
Maybe it's bravado, possibly it's true, and that's the fear of researchers from around North America, together for the first time to share all they know about aggression in girls.
They were not doing well at all, and in fact, some of them were doing worse at the end of treatment than the boys.
Listening, participating is Deborah Pepler from York University. Wanting to understand girl bullies, she videotaped elementary kids in playgrounds.
I'm gonna strangle you. Well, where is it? I'm gonna bring it tomorrow. You better, because if you don't, I'm gonna rip your head off.
Girls were both what one would call physically aggressive and relationally or socially aggressive. And we also observed when we coded bullying that half the time girls bullied, they bullied boys. And that was one of the things that really surprised us.
But the numbers say 474 out of every 100,000 adolescent girls are charged with violent crimes. Still, only a third of the rate for boys. What troubles researchers, though, is that violence is increasing twice as fast among girls. And what the numbers don't show is that girl aggression doesn't always mean physical violence. It can often be quiet manipulation. How?
Using relationships as the vehicle of harm. So manipulating relationships to control someone or trying to damage a relationship in order to get even with someone you're angry with.
Charge your shitting! Calming that anger is already the focus of programs running in schools across Canada, but many are designed with boys in mind. Researchers here want to fix that, want to find girl-centered solutions for a girl-centered problem.
So how are the schools dealing with this problem? Well, a number are using drama to teach a lesson. Here's the CBC's Eve Savory on one such program in British Columbia, a play about Reena Virk's death.
Gabe, would you acknowledge Jason? Wave.
So horrifying was the death that Tim Trelinsky, the drama teacher at Frankhurst Secondary in Surrey, challenged his senior class to help him make sense of
We're
it.
going to start in about 10 minutes.
Over many months of improvising, a 13-scene play evolved as the drama students debated complex issues of friendship and peer pressure, relationships with parents and God, loneliness and victimization.
I've got this great idea, guys. Let's rough her up.
Yeah, I'm gonna go walk over there and I'm gonna push her books down. I want you to shove her hard.
But
you're in this gang, aren't you?
Well, yeah,
well, then
but
do it.
Kyla Parker calls her character the bitch. She's Jen, the gang leader.
Yeah! Get out of here, bitch.
Adults were horrified that it was girls who attacked Reena. Kyla wasn't even surprised.
Well, deep down, all girls probably have anger inside them, and just at some point, it just unleashes. It's like you'll see more girls fights than guys. Like at some schools, that's all it is chick fights. There's like no guys.
I think girls can be more violent than guys at times because, like, if you're at a party or something, like, and a girl walks by that you don't know, you give her a dirty look, or you might say something to her just because of what she's wearing or something like that, and then that could lead to a fight or something.
In the play, Reena makes Jen jealous
Biology,
by
right?
chatting to Jen's
You're
boyfriend.
never there.
Oh shit, I'm missing my boat. It says I got a jet, yo.
Later, Cassandra.
Yo, Ramon, get your ass over here
In
now.
real life, Reena's attackers accused her of stealing someone's boyfriend.
You just better watch out.
The real Reena was something of an outsider, desperate to be accepted. Belle Ranji, who plays Reena, was tormented for being different at a previous school.
Take this anymore. It's like the harder I try, the harder things.
Her wish is for youth to realize it's okay to be different.
There's always going to be people that don't fit into the mainstream, that don't fit in with the popular tall blonde girls. And, you know, she was really easy to pick on. And it was really easy to get away with her because she was just one person. And they had a gang, and there were many girls. It was just really easy target.
Reena's body was in the water 8 days, and no one told. Adults don't get it. Teenagers do.
It's just the fear of knowing that you're the tattletale, that you're the rat. You just don't, like, you don't want to not be a part. Like, if you tell, then you're out. Like, you are so out of the gang.
All the people had seen her get beat up, right? And they probably thought that if they had told the same thing would happen to them.
Writing and performing the play made these young people, who say none of them are in a gang, wonder how they would act in those circumstances.
I learned a lot from it. Seriously, I learned a lot from the play. Like if I was in that position, like beating her up, right? I don't know.
Cassandra McDonald plays Reena's Judas, lures her to the gang's ambush.
I'd probably beat her up. Like seriously, I know it's like a sick thing to say and everything, but I don't think I could walk away. I'd follow Jen.
I own the school. I rule the school. It's my gang, not yours, and you don't belong here, okay?
Yeah,
Maybe it's because I played up in there and I'd stop the fight. I mean, I've been put in a position where I know what it feels like, and it feels really real. And I mean, I could never just watch it happen. I'd definitely do something.
It seems every generation worries about the next.
I think by like generation and generation, children are getting more worse.
There's
in
good
their
aides out there
attitude.
that are smoking and drinking and doing drugs and having sex and getting into violence.
And like, oh, I have a boyfriend now and they're only 10. And I'm like, when I was that age, I was not thinking about boys or nothing. I was just like, I want to have fun. I want to play outside and play with the animals or whatever. And now it's just like they're getting out of control and the parents don't even care.
I walk to school and like all the elementary school kids walk by me and they're swearing and they're fingering each other and pushing each other, and it's like, holy, you know? Elementary school is supposed to be like a little happy land, like, you know?
I think, in like some little way, this place changed everybody in this group.
I think if people see this, they'll realize that, you know, there are teens out there that do care about it.
We need more positive role models, and it's not just what you see at home, it's what you see down the block, it's what you see on TV, it's what you see at school.
I think that the play has turned us all into leaders. Like as before, we might have, if a new girl had come and she wasn't so great and everything, and everyone might have picked on her.
I can't believe you just did this.
In the play, the teen killers regret.
Why'd I just stand there and let it happen?
And then rationalize.
Yeah, I guess it was their own fault, wasn't it?
Fights happen every day. And this one just got out of hand.
That too is like real life. For Reena's parents say none of the young people there that night have ever said, I'm sorry for the death of Reena Virk.
The 6 girls who were convicted in youth court got conditional sentences ranging from 6 months to a year. Warren Glowatsky and Kelly Ellard got life sentences for second-degree murder. Glowatsky will be eligible for parole after serving 7 years, Ellard after serving 5. Coming up on News and Review, conditional sentencing.
The courts are not there to personally satisfy victims. We're there to satisfy social needs.
Paying for the crime by doing time at home. Most criminals, when convicted of serious crimes, especially crimes that involve violence against a person, are sentenced to time in prison. Lately, there's been a trend to treat crimes against property, such as fraud or theft, differently. Upon conviction of these less violent offenses, judges have been sentencing perpetrators to some form of restitution or community service or just loss of certain liberties without actually going to prison. These sentences are called conditional, and most of them involve some form of house arrest. Conditional sentences have been welcomed as promoting rehabilitation and as a cost-effective way to punish without further crowding our penal institutions. But not all conditional sentences have met with approval. This is what most people probably think about when they think about crime and punishment. As the saying goes, you do the crime, you do the time. And time means time in prison. But now there is another kind of sentence. For 30,000 Canadian criminals, this is doing time. Not in a prison cell, but at home. There are strict limits and constraints on a person sentenced to serve time at home, but it's a long way from the penitentiary. On the whole, Canadians like the idea when it involves a non-violent crime such as fraud or break and enter. But 1 in 4 conditional sentences is handed down for a crime involving violence or sex, and that's got some people wondering whether justice is being served. The federal government changed the rules on sentencing in 1996. The criminal code was amended to allow judges the option of sentencing offenders to serve their time in the community under house arrest. But since then, there has been outrage in many places over these conditional sentences. What you're about to see is what happened in one community in Nova Scotia to one victim of crime and to her attacker.
Antigonish, Nova Scotia, quiet, pretty, home of St. Francis Xavier University, and where in the past year 3 men have been given conditional sentences for sexual assault. One of the victims was Krista. 3 years ago, while a student at St. Francis Xavier, she went to the police with a dreadful story. She'd been raped, she said, by a member of the university's hockey team. It turned her life literally into a nightmare.
Ever since this happened, I have the same nightmare every night about him, so he's the last person I think of when I go to sleep at night, thinking, oh great, I'm gonna have the dream again. He's the first person I think of when I wake up because I know I had it again. And it's every day, it's a challenge to try to put him out of my mind. So, I'm hoping someday it'll get better and someday I can go through an entire day without having to remember what he did.
Krista expected Nova Scotia's justice system would give her some satisfaction. A jury convicted Andrew Power of sexual assault. Last fall, a judge gave him a conditional sentence of 20 months.
I had prepared myself that since he was found guilty of a violent crime, that he would be sentenced for jail. I was told that the maximum he could get was 10 years. So I was expecting him to get some jail time. So when the judge stated the sentence, I was appalled and I stormed out of the courtroom. I couldn't help it. I screamed something at the judge and I was like, I couldn't handle it because it was so different from what I had expected for him to have received. It wasn't enough. And I don't know how the judge could justify giving him such a lenient sentence.
Do you remember what you screamed at the judge?
I told him he was fucking pathetic.
While Krista struggles to piece her life back together, Andrew Power, who refused to be interviewed for this story, is serving his time at his parents' home in this quiet and comfortable suburb of London, Ontario. For 10 months, he can only go outdoors for medical reasons or to volunteer to work with young people, making use of the hockey skills he's developed playing for local teams. For the second 10 months, he's free to find work or go to university by day. He's obligated to do 150 hours of community service work, which can include imparting his hockey expertise, in the words of his sentence, to young and inspiring hockey players.
The hardest thing for me to deal with is, here's this guy who's sitting at his parents' house. He sleeps in his own bed every night. He gets a home-cooked meal. He probably plays Nintendo all day. He's got no worries. He's allowed to volunteer every day if he so chooses. He can go to the hockey rink. The judge allowed him to do that. So he can leave his house every day and call it volunteering. How can anybody justify that to me, that is appropriate sentence? I don't think anybody can.
In the past, jail time was seen as appropriate for rapists and other criminals involved in violent crimes. Punishment and deterring others was seen as part of the process. But since 1996, the criminal code has allowed for conditional sentencing in an effort to ease the pressures on prisons and to move towards emphasis on rehabilitation, not punishment.
I'd rather have someone out contributing to the community than sitting in some warehouse doing nothing, but costing me $65,000, $75,000, $80,000 a year to feed and guard and change his laundry.
Don Murray is a Halifax lawyer with the firm that defended Andrew Power. Although Murray will not talk about Krista's rape, he defends the principle of conditional sentencing.
It requires nothing of me but my time if I get sent to jail. It requires something positive of me if, in addition to being under house arrest for a period of time and having my liberty restricted, I have conditions to go to the schools and speak about my offense and what I did wrong, or if I have to volunteer my time to a community group.
Before this happened, I was a very optimistic person. I loved life. I had the rest of my life ahead of me, and I looked forward to things. I don't now. He inflicted pain on me. He inflicted humiliation on me. I went through the last 3 years a different person, and he had no right to do that to me. And he should be punished for that. It should hurt, like I've been hurt.
It's not personal. The courts are not there to personally satisfy victims of crime. We're there to satisfy social needs and deal with social needs and social repair, not individual repair.
Ron McDonald wonders if society buys that. The assistant coach of the St. Francis Xavier basketball team, McDonald was also the senior Crown attorney involved in the prosecution of Andrew Power. For the justice system to work, he says, the public must feel there's justice.
Our system is based on the rule of law. We wake up every day believing that our relationships with one another are governed by the rule of law, by laws, and that if you break the law, there will be a sanction associated with it. And if the community starts to believe that there really isn't a sufficient penalty for a serious crime, they start to lose faith in their system. And that is always a concern of those of us who work in the justice system. The concern is, especially in sexual assault cases, that if the message that's being sent is that the justice system does not treat these cases as serious, that women or men, if they're the victim, will not come forward. The other concern is if the community does not see the system as treating crimes of sexual assault as serious, then maybe it doesn't send the message to the young people in the community that this is something they have to work hard to avoid.
The fearmongers who talk about people getting away with things and people not getting punished sufficiently for things are complaining probably about the 10% of the worst offenders in the country who continue to commit crime after crime and who aren't, frankly, a manageable risk for a conditional sentence. So their complaints really shouldn't be about conditional sentencing. Their worries should be about a very limited number of offenders in this country who aren't a manageable risk.
So are you saying that public opinion is behind the times, that the law is ahead of public opinion for once?
I think that would be fair.
Where, Krista asks, has justice gone?
I can see it being to some benefit for crimes of nonviolence where there's no victim. I can see it that it would give them time to reflect on what they did. But for someone who is convicted of a crime that involves an intent to harm somebody, like this one, it's a slap on the wrist. I know if I had a friend that came to me right now and said, I was raped, what do I do? What should I do? I would tell her, I'd look her straight in the face and say, don't do it, it's not worth it. You know, he got a conviction, yes, but he's not punished for it. So why put yourself through the embarrassment and the humiliation of going through a trial that in a court system that's going to last 3 years and have him get away with having just to sit in his house for 10 months? It's not worth it. And I'm really sorry that I went through it.
Recently, Canada's highest court ruled on conditional sentencing. The Supreme Court says judges cannot exclude violent crimes from conditional sentencing. The court says excluding violent offenses would make the sentencing process too rigid. It says that sentences can be used if a judge finds an offender is not a danger to society. According to the Supreme Court, conditional sentences are meaningful alternatives to locking people up in prison. Next, Iran. Are the Ayatollahs losing their grip on a fundamentalist society? Iran, or Persia as it was known, used to be ruled by a king. This king was called the Shah, and he sat on the peacock throne from which he ran his country and his subjects with an iron hand. His absolute rule was backed by a large army, a cruel secret service, and the United States, which depended on its large oil reserves. Just over 20 years ago, all that changed forever. In 1979, Iran was in the grip of a fundamentalist religious fervor. Students poured into the streets, angry at the autocratic rule of the country's king, known as the Shah, and determined to overthrow him and sweep Iranian society clean of what they called corrupting Western influences. They did it in the name of Islam, spurred on by this man, a religious leader named Ayatollah Khomeini. They also directed their anger at the United States, which had supported the Shah's regime. They occupied the American embassy in Tehran, taking 51 people hostage. As the tension in the streets escalated, the world watched and feared the worst. 6 of the American diplomats managed to sneak away during the takeover. The Americans spent 5 desperate days on the move before the Canadian ambassador to Iran, Ken Taylor, agreed to help. With the help of the U.S. spy agency, the CIA, the 6 Americans were given Canadian identities. They pretended to be Canadians working for a film company.
I was the transportation coordinator, and I was married to her. She was the scriptwriter. I don't recall being told very much about the movie business, so if somebody had actually tried to talk to me about it, I probably would have run out of things to say very quickly.
Ken Taylor was the hero of what became known as the Canadian Caper. In Calgary, a hometown boy got a hero's welcome. Ken Taylor is Canada's ambassador to Iran and the man who masterminded the recent escape of 6 Americans from Tehran.
Well, I got the passports. And I think the rest is what you'd call, surely you've got it in journalism too, Duart, a trade secret.
Eventually, the hostages were let go, but Iran spent the next 20 years in isolation, an international outcast. The Ayatollah Khomeini and those who followed him imposed their version of Islamic law, and that means they governed the country according to their interpretation of the Koran. It was a harsh, repressive government that tolerated no dissent. But nearly 20 years after the revolution, Iranians started to want something more. They wanted to reform the revolution. This is the man they looked to, Mohammad Khatami. In a huge surprise, he was elected president of Iran, promising greater freedom for the people. And it was a promise many Iranians hoped would be fulfilled, not snuffed out by the old fundamentalist guardians of the revolution.
There are two Friday rituals in Tehran. One of them is going to prayers. The other is going to the mountains. For many Iranians, especially young people, there's a brief sense of liberty here. For a few hours, they can escape the severe and relentless application of Islamic law, or at least enjoy the illusion.
Yes, you can find here more freedom, and you can talk to maybe girls, and girls talk to boys. That's one of the major reasons they come here.
There's always the chance of being caught and punished, but they risk it anyway. Holding hands is still daring and rare, yet another example of how life is changing, relaxing. Like the way this young man, Ali, is willing to openly criticize the country's religious leadership.
We tolerated that kind of pressure for about 20 years, but as you see, the young people are not going to tolerate it anymore.
20 years since Iran traded one dictatorship for another, swept aside the despised and corrupt regime of the Shah for the harsh and absolute power of the Ayatollahs. President Mohammad Khatami is the first elected leader to challenge that authority. Slowly and cautiously, but challenge nevertheless. His power comes from the street, not the mosque. An extraordinary 70% of the popular vote. Not a revolution, but a massive call for reform from a young and disillusioned generation. With more than half the population under 25, this is a country going through an extraordinary and perhaps dangerous culture clash. Which way will this burgeoning population of young people go? The music of Pink Floyd or the teachings of Imam Khomeini? Friday morning prayers or video games? Spend an hour at one of Tehran's shopping malls and you can see Khatami's influence. Women wearing lipstick and makeup, headscarves defiantly loosened to show more hair. A middle-aged man with the courage to speak out.
You know, we are surviving, let me tell you that. We are just surviving this thing. We are not living.
Spend an hour in this university dormitory, though, and you see the other side of Iran. A number of these young people belong to the youth movement known as the Basij, also known as the morality police.
Many of these youngsters that you are telling about them for us, they are not educated. They have not been educated in university. They want to be free and do anything they want. But our society has rules, and anyone can't do anything that is want.
They certainly wouldn't appreciate 17-year-old Sarah and her passion for rollerblading. Neither did the police in this Tehran park, who picked her up and gave her a warning. One of her skating partners is Bassoud, who prefers rock and roll to either Islam or revolution. Some people ask me not to wear headscarves, he says, but I do it anyway. And sometimes when I go to parties, I wear an earring. Behind this new sense of change and openness in Iran, there is also profound anxiety. Many here believe reform is inevitable, cannot be stopped. Yet religious leaders still control the army, the secret police, and the justice system. Power they will never give up easily.
So Iran's new president, Mohammad Khatami, wanted to bring changes to these young Iranians. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed political support in the country's parliament. An election early this year set the stage for a showdown between the country's hardline religious leaders and the reformers. And once again, there was talk of revolution in Iran, but this time a quiet one at the ballot box. The vote brought tremendous hope for big changes.
Free for everything, a good life.
Very free life, and to live any kind of life we want.
The religious leaders themselves weren't too visible in the campaign, but they gazed down with stern disapproval. Their hardline supporters stacked the election, manipulating the rules, disqualifying hundreds of reform candidates. They were considered to be dangerous. Just how much more dissent the hardliners would tolerate was uncertain. The crowds at the reform rallies, segregated by sex, cheered wildly. Abbas Abdi, who once led the hostage-takers at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, announced that the days of strict government rule, which he fought for, were now over. And Abraham Mirtamati, who was also at the embassy, savored the emotion of the moment.
We were like these young people, and we wanted to support our revolution, our freedom, the freedom of our country, and our independence.
And this is the same thing 20 years later.
The same thing.
Election day finally came, and the turnout was huge.
I have come here to vote, to take part in my own fate.
This time we need changes, big changes.
This woman brought her 14-year-old daughter along with her to the polling station for a lesson in democracy.
She wants to vote. She has learned that she has to vote in order to get her rights back.
That message became loud and clear when the votes were counted. Iranians voted for huge changes in their country and in their lives. The question was, would the country's all-powerful religious leaders allow it?
For the first time since Iranians unsettled the world with their Islamic revolution, they now have a government committed to reform, to democracy, and to freedom. This man selling socks in the bazaar for 15 cents a pair is proud his vote helped do it. He wants reform and says there can be no more excuses. The reformers are now members of parliament, he says. They have the power to do whatever they want. They've been talking for years, says this man. Now they should stop talking and act. That is what our martyrs did during the war with Iraq. The younger the voter, the more impatient. Sharach Vakt wants a better life and says the authorities had better listen.
They have to, but if they do not listen to us, maybe it's going to happen a new revolution.
Just a few years ago, that kind of talk would have meant imprisonment or perhaps something far worse. The thing is, it still might. People here keep on pushing, but no one really knows how much the Ayatollahs and the security organs they control are willing to tolerate. The clerical authorities have shut down this newspaper 4 times. Its journalists were intensely happy today, but many fear the public expectations exceed the confines of Iran's Islamic code. This is the start of the real problem, says this reporter. Things are only beginning. But the publisher, who's been imprisoned for his writing, happily predicts the will of the people is unstoppable.
Yeah. There is no other way. Just reform. It is only way.
Gradually, though, the people are being told. For your own sakes, gradually.
Still to come, hockey injury.
Here it is here. It's a knee on knee, and Sundin goes down and grabs.
Selling a rough and tumble game to a larger audience at the cost of the lives and careers of the players. Professional hockey, and in North America that means the National Hockey League, has been promoted and sold as a very physical sport. It's always been like that, even before the advent of modern protective gear. The saying goes, if you can't beat them in the alley, you can't beat them on the ice. And that speaks volumes. To succeed in the NHL, players have to be willing to dish out and take a degree of physical punishment unparalleled in any other sport. And that's always been a big part of the fan appeal, and especially now when the sport is being marketed in the United States to fans who are short on hockey knowledge, but long on thirst for hard-hitting action. As a result, we've seen a rash of injuries lately that have endangered the lives and the careers of young players.
Taken to the end boards by Primo, a centering pass, scores!
It's hard to beat a game of hockey. The speed, the skill, the fast and furious action. Few sports are as physically demanding. Take a closer look now. you've got powerful, well-conditioned athletes skating on sharp steel blades, carrying large sticks, and moving a hard, solid object around over a slippery surface. It almost goes without saying, injuries are part of the game. It's estimated that 80% of all hockey injuries are caused by what doctors call direct trauma, sudden, forceful contact with another player, or with the boards, or the ice, or the puck.
He was nearly killed in a game in January when he took a slap shot on the Adam's apple. He was saved by a tracheotomy and then had surgery to repair his fractured larynx.
Sometimes it's a blade, more often than not, a high stick. That's why cuts to the face and head are the most common types of injuries. Sometimes, though, an incident happens that is so terrible and so shocking that it causes everyone to stop and take another look at hockey injuries, to question why they happen and to wonder what can be done about them. Such was the case when Toronto Maple Leafs defenseman Brian Berard suffered a devastating eye injury. Here's the CBC's Norman Hermant.
Boy, he's down. This is going to be a problem.
It looked bad as soon as Brian Berard went down, and it was.
This is a young boy just starting out. I would never want to see this thing happen to any young man.
It was this wild swing that got Brian Berard, a complete accident. Ottawa's Marian Hossa's stick hit Berard in his right eye. It's likely he'll never see from that eye again. His career may well be over. Today, the Leafs were back in business, and not many visors were in sight. These young fans say their heroes should have no choice.
If they don't start making them wear visors, it's going to go crazy.
They should have to, because there's pucks, they're hard.
Berard's injury has reopened the debate about protective visors and how they're viewed by many players.
There are people who say, yeah, I mean, wearing a visor is maybe you're a bit of a pussy, but it's absolute stupidity now.
I had a good talk with my wife about it last night, actually, and she wants me to wear one, obviously, and I'm thinking about going back to one.
Other players say despite what happened to Brian Berard, visors just aren't an option.
And it's like looking through a windshield sometimes, and then it cuts off, so you see, it's like wearing bifocals. You have two different views.
But most NHL players have worn visors before. They're required in all levels of junior and minor hockey. Before they were made mandatory in the late 70s, there were routinely more than 250 eye injuries a year in Canada. Now, they are rare.
Right now, when I'm trying to look at something, 2 eyes would be better than 1 right now, and that's my motto.
Mark Dial knows what Berard is going through. He was a rising star with Toronto's farm team in St. John's, until he nearly lost an eye during a game. With only 10% vision in that eye, he was told he would likely never play again. Ask him about visors, even he's not convinced.
I agree that visors could help in some instances, but not all, because there is 9 recorded instances where people have visors, they're completely blind in their eyes.
The Canadian Safety Council doesn't buy that argument. It says if visors are worn properly, they will prevent almost all eye injuries. The council says the NHL has to act now.
Because if it doesn't happen, we'll have more stories, more terrible, terrible stories of Brian Berard and many, many other hockey players over the years who have lost an eye.
After several weeks and several operations on his eye, Brian Berard spoke publicly about what happened to him. He still didn't know whether he'd regained sight in his damaged eye or whether he'd ever play hockey again. But much to everyone's surprise, Berard said that if he did make it back to the NHL, he might not wear a visor.
I'm a believer in visors. I think they can help prevent injuries. But myself, I don't like to wear a visor. I think that it kind of does limit a little bit of vision on the ice.
A recent poll by the NHL Players Association showed that about 95% of players favor freedom of choice when it comes to using visors. But not too long ago, they didn't want to wear helmets either. Now, of course, the league makes wearing helmets compulsory. But even those helmets haven't signaled the end of head injuries. In fact, concussions are a growing problem, as the CBC's Daryl McIntyre reports.
They happened on different nights, to different players, on different teams. But there's one thing all these hockey hits have in common. The player on the receiving end wound up with a concussion, one of the National Hockey League's most common injuries and one of its most serious.
Hit the net!
Dr. Pat Bishop teaches sports medicine, coaches university hockey, and says head injuries are nothing to fool around with.
The more concussions you have, the longer the post-concussive syndromes seem to persist, and eventually you can be left with a severe cognitive impairment.
Just ask Stanley Cup winner Jeff Bukaboom. He retired last year after his 6th concussion. Today he suffers from chronic headaches and fatigue.
Can't do the things I want to do, you know. I'm here on 10 acres and I can't go out and do all the things I want to do as far as physical activity, because what it does is it brings on all these symptoms quicker.
In the last few years, concussions ended the careers of several other hockey stars, too. In fact, overall, the number of concussions in the NHL is creeping up. And that's prompting some people to call for changes. Changes like an increase in ice size, or a ban on hard plastic elbow pads, even a mandatory rest period for players who get concussions. The NHL says right now all those ideas are either too expensive or too complicated, but insists it is taking this problem seriously.
When there's a blow to the head, everyone's more sensitive and very careful because of the long-term effects. And if there's any doubt whatsoever, that player doesn't go back on the ice or play the game.
The league also toughened its helmet rules, making CSA-approved helmets mandatory for players under 25. Not enough, say some fans.
I think the attitude of some is that because you're wearing a helmet, you can't be hurt.
In fact, Pat Bishop says helmets prevent skull fractures, but do nothing to prevent concussions caused by blows to the cheek or jaw.
I think in hockey, we have far too much head checking, and we should do something about it. There are some other things of running players into the boards and taking their head intentionally against the glass. These kinds of things have to be eliminated.
Don't think there's a penalty on it, although it was an elbow right in the chin by Berard.
Or else, Bishop says, concussions like this one that ended Jeff Courtnall's career will keep on happening.
One of the most disturbing aspects of hockey injuries is that many, some say as much as a third of them, are caused by foul play, by dirty hits, cheap shots, and nasty stick work. And that has a lot of people saying players just don't respect each other anymore. No example was more ugly than a vicious attack recently that occurred in the game between Boston and Vancouver, as the CBC's Ian Hannah-Mansing reports.
Even in a game renowned for its physical, sometimes violent play, everyone agrees this crossed the line. When Bruins defenseman Marty McSorley slashed the Canucks' Donald Brashear on the side of the head, players on both teams were stunned, even sickened.
I've never seen anything like that before, and like I said, I'm speechless for that.
We all know it's a dangerous game, and we all know, injuries can happen. But something like that really kind of, takes the art of the game. And
it's just not acceptable. There's toughness, and then there's stupidity. And
the shockwaves continued throughout hockey today. From former player Ted Green, himself a victim of stick swinging 30 years ago.
I think it was uncharacteristic of Marty to do what he did. But he has to be responsible. He has to have more respect for the game than he showed in that action.
And at pickup hockey games, the same sense of disbelief and anger.
I can't explain that, you know what I mean? What was going through his head? It's like he's insane or something.
It's a big black eye on the entire sport, from minors all the way up to the NHL.
Just days after delivering that slash, Marty McSorley was suspended for the rest of the season, the longest penalty for violence the NHL has ever handed down. Not long after that, he was charged by Vancouver police with assault. In light of all these incidents and injuries, the question becomes, where will it all end?
Here's a chance for Bears, and going in a goal, shoot, scores!
There's no getting away from the fact that hockey will always be a dangerous sport, and there will always be injuries. But calls are mounting for something to be done. Visors, for instance, could be made mandatory. Players could be ordered to wear only the best helmets and to tighten their chin straps. Referees could enforce the rules of the game more strictly. And punishments could be made truly meaningful. As the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. And that's all for this season of News in Review. For CBC News, I'm Knowlton Nash. See you next year.
And what